It was a cold afternoon in a small American town. The wind outside carried the smell of rain and gasoline. Inside the old diner, the lights were warm, the walls covered with pictures from better days. The sound of forks and quiet laughter filled the air. People chatted about nothing important: coffee, football, weather, just another slow day. But the peace didn't last long. The door creaked open, letting in a sharp breath of cold air. Every head turned for a second, then went back to their meals. Yet something about that moment felt different. Something quiet, but powerful, had just entered the room. Before we move forward, tell us in the comments, where are you watching from and what time is it right now? And don't forget to like and subscribe to Black and Wronged for more heart-touching stories. Let's get started. Who just walked in? And why does it feel like the air inside the diner suddenly changed? In the far corner of the diner sat Jack Rayner, a middle-aged biker everyone called Steelwolf. He came there almost every afternoon, quiet, calm, and alone. His leather vest was worn, his hands rough from years on the road. A silver cross hung around his neck, shining faintly in the sunlight that slipped through the blinds. People often stayed away from him. He looked like the kind of man who had seen too many fights, too many lonely nights. But behind those tired gray eyes lived a man who carried memories heavier than any road trip. He stirred his coffee without really tasting it, lost somewhere far away. Outside, a cold wind blew harder, tapping against the glass like soft knocks from fate itself. And for the first time in a long while, Steelwolf looked up, as if he felt something coming. He didn't know it yet, but destiny was about to sit down, right across from him, in a form he'd never expect. The diner's bell rang softly as the door opened again. A cold gust rushed in, making napkins flutter and coffee cups tremble. Everyone turned to look, and saw a thin young woman standing there. Her gray sweater hung loose over her shoulders, and her shoes didn't even match. In her arms she held a little girl, maybe 3 years old, wrapped in a faded pink blanket. The child's face was pale, her lips trembling from the cold. The mother looked around the diner, not for a seat or a menu, but for mercy. Her eyes carried a silent cry that no one wanted to answer. The waitress behind the counter froze. People whispered, then went back to their food, pretending not to see. But Jack Rayner saw, and the moment his eyes met hers, something deep inside him shifted, like a memory long buried starting to rise again. What was this stranger searching for? And why did her face feel so painfully familiar to him? The woman walked slowly toward Jack's table. Her steps were shaky, her arms holding her daughter tight. No one said a word. Even the jukebox's music faded, like the room itself was holding its breath. When she reached his table, she didn't sit. Instead, she bent down on her knees beside him. The entire diner turned quiet. Forks stopped midair, eyes wide in disbelief. Her lips trembled as she pointed to the plate in front of him. A plate of half-eaten fries and a piece of steak still warm with steam. "Sir," she whispered softly, "can I take the leftovers for my daughter?" The room froze. The little girl pressed her face against her mother's chest, and tears began to roll down the woman's cheeks. Tears not just of hunger, but of humiliation. Jack's hand tightened around his coffee cup. Everyone waited for his reaction. Would he turn her away? Or do something no one expected? For a few long seconds, no one in the diner moved. Even the sound of the coffee machine faded away. Every eye was fixed on Jack Rayner, the man everyone feared, now staring at a woman on her knees. He didn't speak. He just looked at her trembling hands and the small child clinging to her sweater. Something old and painful stirred inside him, a memory he had tried to forget. Years ago, he had a little girl too. She was about the same age as this child, with the same soft eyes and tiny hands. But life had torn them apart long ago. And he never saw her again. Jack's throat tightened. The mother's quiet voice still echoed in his head. "Can I take the leftovers for my daughter?" His fingers loosened on the cup, and he took a deep breath. Everyone waited. And then, he slowly pushed his plate toward her. But that wasn't all. Jack had something else in mind. Something that would leave the entire diner speechless. Jack stood up from his seat. The woman flinched, thinking she had done something wrong. But instead of walking away, he turned toward the counter. Everyone's eyes followed him, the big, rough biker with a scarred face and silent steps. He spoke quietly to the cook, who nodded without asking questions. A few minutes later, Jack came back carrying 2 takeout boxes filled with warm food, and a small bottle of milk for the child. Then, to everyone's shock, he knelt down beside the woman, the same man who had once sworn never to kneel for anyone again. "This isn't leftovers," he said softly. "It's fresh and there's more for tomorrow." He placed the boxes in her shaking hands and added a small folded bill. It was enough to feed them for a week. The woman's lips trembled as she looked at him and whispered, "Why would you help me?" Her question would unlock a truth Jack hadn't spoken in years. Jack looked at the little girl, then at her mother. The room around him blurred, like his mind had traveled years back in time. He saw the face of his own daughter, the one he had lost when his marriage fell apart. He had chosen the road over family, noise over love, and every mile he rode since then carried a piece of regret. Now, standing before him, was a reflection of the life he could never fix. His voice was rough but gentle. "Because once," he said quietly, "I couldn't help mine." The mother covered her mouth as tears spilled down her face. The whole diner stayed silent. Even the tough bikers at the next booth looked away, pretending not to wipe their eyes. For the first time in years, Jack's voice didn't sound like steel. It sounded human. The act was done. But something powerful was about to happen next. Something that would prove kindness could spread faster than words. The mother held the food and the money close to her chest, whispering thank you again and again. Her voice shook, but her eyes now carried light instead of fear. For a moment, no one moved. Then something beautiful happened. The waitress behind the counter walked over with a cup of hot cocoa. She smiled gently and handed it to the little girl. Soon, another man at a nearby table stood up and left a few dollars beside them. It was as if Jack's small act had unlocked something inside everyone. Kindness began to move through the room like sunlight breaking through a cloudy sky. Jack watched quietly as the woman stood up, holding her daughter. She gave him one last look, the kind of look that said, "Thank you for seeing me." Then she walked out into the cold, her little girl safe in her arms. Jack sat back down, staring at the window, and what he saw in that reflection would change the way he saw himself forever. In the glass window, Jack didn't just see his own tired face. He saw the little girl's reflection, smiling back at him, as if she was still there, reminding him that even a small act of kindness can echo far beyond one moment. For the first time in years, Jack felt peace. The noise of the cafe faded and his heart felt full. He realized he didn't need to be rich to make someone's day better. He just needed to care. As he walked out into the evening snow, the city lights sparkled like tiny stars. And deep inside, he carried something brighter than all of them. The quiet joy of knowing he had made a difference. That night, Jack didn't just help someone. He rediscovered the part of himself he thought was lost forever. Sometimes, the smallest act of kindness can heal two hearts at once, theirs and yours. Before you go, tell us in the comments, have you ever helped someone who changed your life in return? And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Black and Wronged for more heart-touching stories that remind us kindness always finds its way back.